continue with To Build a Fire, class 12th ISC story. Last time we had covered the topic up till page 40 in the story, and that was when he had reached the forks, and there he was ready to have his lunch, and he removed the mitten from his hand. As soon as he removed it, the hands became numb. But he did not try to put on the mittens because he wanted to have his lunch, so he just stroke his fingers against his legs. Now let's see some more of it. The sting that followed upon striking of his fingers against his legs ceased so quickly that he was startled. He had no chance to take a bite of biscuit. He struck the fingers repeatedly and returned them to the mitten, barring the other hand for the purpose of eating. So when he had stricken his hands against the legs, the sting or the warmth that was felt in the hands immediately disappeared in that very cold, to which he became surprised. So immediately he didn't want to take any more chance, and he immediately put his fingers inside the mitten. But he stopped the other hand because he wanted to have his biscuits. He tried to take a mouthful, but the ice muzzle prevented. Now with the other hand, he wanted to have that mouthful of biscuits inside his mouth, but he forgot that there was an ice covered muzzle all around his mouth. He had forgotten to build a fire and thaw out, and in order to melt that ice, he had forgotten to build a fire so that the ice could be melted from his mouth. He chuckled at his foolishness, and as he chuckled, he noted the numbness creeping into the exposed fingers. Chuckle means he smiled at his foolishness, as if he knew that what a foolish thing I have done. And then he noticed that numbness was creeping into his next hands also, the fingers of the next hand. He wondered whether the toes were warm or numb. There was a line left. Also, he noted that the stinging which had first come to his toes when he sat down was already passing away. He wondered whether the toes were warm or numb. He moved them inside the moccasins and decided that they were numb. Now, at the same time, initially he had noticed a sting or a warmth in his legs when he sat down to eat. But now he could not realize any movement or any type of feeling in his legs. So he was wondering whether his legs were warm or cold. So he decided to put his legs into the moccasins, and as he put into the moccasins, immediately a decision came in his mind that his legs have become numb, so he could not feel anything. He pulled the mitten on hurriedly and stood up. He was a bit frightened. He stamped up and down while the stinging returned into the feet. It certainly was cold, was his thought. That man from Sulphur Creek had spoken the truth when telling how cold it sometimes got in the country. Now he immediately put the mittens into his hand very quickly, and then he stood up from that ice log, and then he was actually a bit frightened that maybe I may become frozen. So he started moving his legs to and fro, and his hands also, because it was certainly cold. And then it came to his mind that a man at Sulphur Creek had met who told that this country sometimes become very cold in this country, and he had laughed at him at that time. And this man, who is now getting cold, had mocked at that man of Sulphur Creek, and now he realized that that man of Sulphur Creek was quite. Then that was no mistake about it. It was cold. He strode up and down, stamping his feet and threshing his arms until reassured by the returning warmth. So he came to know that that man was not mistaken. It was certainly very, very cold. And so he strode up and down. He moved here and there in order to get a movement in his legs. Then he stamped his feet into the ground, moved it to and fro. And then he threshed his arms also in order to get the warmth back into his arms. Then he got out matches and proceeded to make a fire. Then he decided that I should build a fire, so he took out the matchsticks. From the undergrowth where high water of previous spring had lodged a supply of seasoned twigs, he got his firewood. Then he went to some undergrowth, to that area where there was a spring that he found previously. There he found some firewood as material for building the fire. Working carefully from a small beginning, he soon had a roaring fire. When he had lit the fire, initially it was a small beginning, then it became very hot, and over which he thawed the ice from his face, and in the protection of which he ate his biscuits. So then he put his face just around the fire at a certain distance so that the ice could be thawed away or melted away, and then in that warmth only he ate his biscuits. For the moment the cold of the space was outwitted. For the moment he didn't even realize that it was very cold over there. The dog also took satisfaction to that fire. The dog had stretched out close to the fire, but at a certain distance so that he might not get burnt. When the man had finished, he filled his pipe and took his comfortable time over a smoke. Now when the man had had his lunch, then he sat down and he filled his pipe with some tobacco and he started smoking. Then he pulled on his mittens, settled the ear flaps of his cap firmly about his ears, and took the creek trail up the left fork. Now after he had his smoke, he stood up immediately and he put on his mittens and he settled the ear flaps from his cap tightly towards his ears, and then he took the path of the towards the creek from that fork. The dog was disappointed and yearned back towards the fire. The dog was very disappointed that why is this man going away so quickly. He wanted to go back again to the fire. This man did not know cold, but this man, as we know from the initial time only in this story, that he was not given to thinking. He didn't even think anything. So for him it was no cold. Possibly all the generations of his ancestry had been ignorant of cold, of real cold, of cold 107 degrees below freezing point. So it could be made out from his way of movement that maybe he belongs to such a generation where all the members of his family did not ever encounter such a cold and were not aware of the cold, which was 107 degrees below the freezing point. But the dog knew, all its ancestry knew, and it had inherited the knowledge, and it knew that it was not good to walk abroad in such fearful cold. Now here we are told that the dog already knew, because the dog and all such type of wolf dogs, they all came to know that such type of cold occurs and it is not wise to move ahead in such a bitter cold. It was a time to lie snug in a hole in the snow and wait for a curtain of cloud to be drawn across the face of the outer space whence this cold came. For the dog, it was a time to just snug yourself in a hole and wait till the time that the snow stops or some layer of cloud is seen all around. On the other hand, there was no keen intimacy between the dog and the man. Now, since the man and the dog had no intimate relationship with each other, so the man did not care about the dog's feelings, and the dog also did not know how this man was moving ahead. The one was the toil slave of the other, and the only caress it had ever received were the caress of the whip flash and of harsh and menacing throat sounds that threatened the whip's lash. Here we are told that since the dogs, such type of wolf dogs, are only made to move the sledge over the snow, so these dogs are only known to the sound of the whip, hitting them with a whip and then roaring at them with the harsh sounds of the throat, because such type of dogs are always beaten in order to let the sledge move ahead. So the dog made no effort to communicate its apprehension to the man. So the dog knew that if I tell anything to this man, it's useless, and my fear is my fear, this man will never come to know. It was not concerned in the welfare of the man, it was for its own sake that it yearned back towards the fire. Now this dog was not concerned about the welfare of the man, because he knew that the man can decide what to do. But he thought about his own welfare, and so he yearned back. He wanted to go back to the fire, so he tried to go back towards the fire. But the man whistled and spoke to it with the sound of whip lashes, and dog swung in at the man's heels and followed after. Now, as the dog was moving towards the fire, the man immediately whistled, and he spoke out those words which are spoken when these dogs are hit with the help of whips. So the dog immediately became frightened, and he had to move back and walk with the man. The man took a chew of tobacco and proceeded to start a new amber beard, also his moist breath quickly powdered with white, his moustache, eyebrows, and lashes. There did not seem to be so many springs on the left fork of the Henderson, and for half an hour the man saw no signs of any. And then it happened. At a place where there were no signs, where the soft, unbroken snow seemed to advertise solidity beneath, the man broke through. It was not deep. He wet himself halfway to the knees before he floundered out to the firm crust. So the man, he was walking ahead and he was chewing his tobacco, and this tobacco was ready to make again another amber beard on his face, and his eyebrows, his eyes, and his entire face was covered with the dust of the snow. And he had a moist breath also, as we know that in cold moist breath occurs. Then he found that as he was walking, there were no signs of any springs on the left side of the Henderson Creek, on the left side of the Henderson Fork. But for half an hour, he did not find any type of such springs. So he was quite, you can say, feeling safe that no, there will be no other springs. So at a place, he was actually deceived. At a place where he found that the snow was unbroken and very smooth and was solid. There, when he was walking, immediately he broke through. He went inside, but it was not so deep. He wet himself up to the knees, and immediately he came out on the other side of the crest. He was angry and cursed his luck aloud. He had hoped to get into the camp with the boys at 6 o'clock, and this would delay him an hour, for he would have to build a fire and dry out his footgear. At this point, he was quite angry, because whatever he had planned that by 6 p.m. I have to reach towards the camp where the boys would be waiting for me, that plan will be delayed by an hour, because now he will have to build a fire and then he will have to warm himself. This was imperative at that low temperature, he knew that much, and he turned aside to the bank which he climbed. On the top, tangled in the underbush, above the trunks of several small spruce trees, was a high water deposit of dry firewood, sticks and twigs principally, but also large portions of seasoned branches and fine dry last year's grasses. He threw down several large pieces on top of the snow. Now this man was ready to prepare he was ready to find some firewood in order to build a fire. And it was very important for him in this type of cold atmosphere. So he turned aside to the bank, and there he climbed up. On the top, he found that under the underbush there were several small spruce trees, and there were a bundle of various dry firewood also, sticks and twigs and all, and large portions of fine dry last year's grass was also there. So he threw some of the logs on the bed of the ice. This served for a foundation and prevented the young flame from drowning itself in the snow. It otherwise would melt. So when he started throwing more and more logs of wood, the flame was about to, you can say, extinguish. Immediately the flame started burning. Otherwise it would have melted. The flame he got by touching a match to a small shred of birch bark that he took from his pocket. This burned even more readily than paper. Placing it on the foundation, he fed the young flame with wisps of dry grass and with the tiniest dry twigs. So he had a birch bark in his pocket. He took out the match and he had struck against it, and he lit the fire. This fire was readily glowing, and then he placed on the foundation of the young flame wisps some pieces of dry grass with tiniest dry twigs. He worked slowly and carefully, keenly aware of his danger. So he was working slowly and very carefully, and he knew that what type of danger he would face. Gradually, as the flame grew stronger, he increased the size of the twigs with which he fed it. He squatted in the snow, pulling the twigs out from their entanglement in the brush and feeding directly to the flame. So the fire grew stronger, and he increased the size of the twigs. He kept on putting the twigs inside the fire so that the fire keeps on burning. And he also squatted, he sat down on the snow. He knew there must be no failure. When it is 75 below zero, a man must not fail in his attempt to build a fire. That is, if his feet are wet. And he knew if it is 75 below freezing point, then a man has to be very, very careful in order to build a fire, especially if his feet are wet. If his feet are dry and he fails, he can run along the trail for half a mile and restore his circulation. He had an alternative that if his feet were dry, then that person would run along the entire trail again and again in order to bring the warmth in his body and bring about the circulation of the blood faster. But the circulation of wet and freezing feet cannot be restored by running when it is 75 below. No matter how fast he runs, the wet feet will freeze the harder. Then he considered that his wet and freezing feet, they required a lot of flame because they cannot be restored. The blood circulation or the warmth cannot be restored on the wet and frozen feet. Okay, so when it is that too when it is 75 below, even if the man runs faster, the feet which are frozen cannot get back their circulation back. All this the man knew. The old timer on Sulphur Creek had told him about it the previous fall, and now he was appreciating the device. So this thing the man knew, whichever we have discussed just now, and he knew that the man on the Sulphur Creek had already told him about the previous fall over here. Already all sensation had gone out of his feet. To build the fire, he had been forced to remove his mittens, and the fingers had quickly gone numb. His pace of 4 miles an hour had kept his heart pumping blood to the surface of his body and all the extremities. Now, since he knew that I have to travel 4 miles an hour as per my plan, and because of which his heart started pumping more faster. Okay, and but the instant he stopped, the action of the pump eased down. The cold of the space smote the unprotected tip of the planet, and he, being on the unprotected tip, received the full force of the blow. The blood of his body recoiled before it. The blood was alive, like the dog, and like the dog, it wanted to hide away and cover itself from the fearful cold. So he knew that the moment he stopped walking, the pumping of the heart would stop. It would ease down. But the cold, he was on the coldest part of the planet, of the Earth's planet. And it was a severe blow to him that he had frozen his feet up to the knees. And he knew that the blood was alive like the dog. And like the dog, it wanted to hide away. The blood wanted to hide away and cover itself from the fearful cold. So long as he walked 4 miles an hour, he pumped that blood willy-nilly to the surface. But now it ebbed away and sank down into the recesses of his body. Now he knew that so long as he was walking at 4 miles an hour, his blood was pumping carefully and regularly. But now it ebbed away. It ebbed away means it didn't seem to him that the blood is pumping throughout all his body organs. It seemed as if it has settled down at very small points of the body. The extremities were the first to feel its absence. His wet feet froze the faster and his exposed fingers numbed the faster. Now, if there would have been a blood circulation, a good blood circulation, his fingers would not have gone numb. So the extremities of the fingers were showing that the blood was not flowing over here. Even the feet, which had frozen down, showed numbness. Though they had not yet begun to freeze, nose and cheeks were already freezing, while the skin of all his body chilled as it lost its blood. Nose and cheeks, as we already know, were already freezing in that cold, and the skin also was feeling the chill winter. But he was safe. Toes and nose and cheeks would be only touched by the frost, for the fire was beginning to burn with strength. He knew that his nose and cheeks were the ones that were to be touched by the frost, and he was confident, as the fire was burning brightly, so he was confident that I'll soon be getting the warmth. He was feeding it with twigs the size of his finger. In another minute he would be able to feed it with branches the size of his wrist, and then he would remove his wet footgear. Now he was time to time putting the twigs into that fire so that it keeps burning itself, and then in a few minutes he would be putting the branches which were the size of his wrist. He would be putting them. Then after that he decided that now he could remove his footgear so that he may get the warmth of that fire. And while it dried, he could keep his naked feet warm by fire, rubbing them at first, of course, with snow. And he knew if I kept my feet naked, it would get the enough warmth if I keep on rubbing them with snow. The fire was success. He was safe. So the fire was glowing brightly, so it seemed as if he was successful in building that fire. And he remembered the advice of the old timer on Sulphur Creek and smiled. The old timer had been very serious in laying down the law that no man must travel alone in Klondike after 50 below. Well, here he was. He had had the accident, he was alone, and he had saved himself. Now he was thinking about that man at the Sulphur Creek who said that nobody should travel in such a cold weather, and that too in Klondike when the temperature is below 50, 50 below the freezing point. But now he thought to himself that I am here and I am alive and I have protected myself. I have taken enough precautions to save myself. Those old timers were rather womanish, some of them, he thought. Then he thought that maybe they were thinking like a woman, and all a man had to do was to keep his head, and he was all right. Any man who was a man could travel alone, but it was surprising the rapidity with which his cheeks and nose were freezing, and he had not thought his fingers could go lifeless in so short a time. So he thought that a man can save himself. The only thing is that he has to keep his head high, and also now he was all right. So he said that any man can travel alone also in this cold weather. But it was surprising the rapidity with which his cheeks and nose were freezing, and he had not thought his fingers could go lifeless in so short a time. But to his surprise, the nose and the cheeks were freezing in no time. They were going on freezing, and his fingers were going numb in no time. Lifeless they were, for he could scarcely make them move together to grip a twig. They had become so lifeless that he could not touch even a, you can say, twig. or had to be put into the fire. He could not even just fold his fingers in order to catch those twigs and put them into the fire. And they seemed remote from his body and from him. When he touched a twig, he had to look and see whether or not he had hold of it. Since the fingers and the hands had gone numb, when he touched a twig, he had to see whether I have touched that twig or not, because he could not feel any sensation. The wires were pretty well between him and his finger ends, all of which counted for little. There was fire snapping and crackling and promising life with every dancing flame. He started to untie his moccasins. They were coated with ice. The thick German socks were like sheets of iron weight to the knees, and the moccasin strings were like rods of steel, and twisted and knotted as by some conflagration. For a moment he tugged with his numb fingers, then realizing the folly of it, he drew his sheath knife. Now he saw that in front of him there was fire which was snapping, crackling, burning in a bright flame. And so he started untying his moccasins, because his moccasins had also ice all around them. And then the thick German socks that he was removing, these moccasins, they were just like sheath in which you keep an iron sword. So they were looking like sheets of iron halfway to the knees. It seemed as if they had also frozen up to the knees, and so when he was removing, it seemed as if they were made up of iron. And the moccasin strings were like rods of steel, all twisted and knotted as by some conflagration. And when he was untying the moccasins, the strings, they looked like rods of steel. They had become so stiff. For a moment he tugged with his numb fingers. So for a moment he was trying to feel that whether I am doing the right thing with my numb fingers. Am I opening that moccasin ropes or strings very carefully? Then he thought that why I am doing this foolishness, why not draw out the sheath knife? So he took out his sheath knife. But before he could cut the strings, it happened. It was his own fault, or rather his mistake. He should not have built the fire under the spruce tree. He should have built it in the open, but it had been easier to pull the twigs from the brush and drop them directly onto the fire. Now the tree under which he had done this carried a weight of snow on its boughs. No wind had blown for weeks, and each bough was fully freighted. Each time he had pulled a twig, he had communicated with a slight agitation to the tree. So before he could cut open his strings, immediately he realized that he had done a very big mistake. He had burned the fire under a spruce tree, and the spruce tree was carrying a huge amount of snow on its branches. And it was his mistake that he could have burned the fire in an open place, but now it was too late. So the tree, each time he had pulled a twig, he had communicated a sight, because whenever he was trying to pull the twigs from that tree, the tree was having a shake, and the snow also from that tree was having a shake, and ultimately it had to fall down. It had agitated the tree so far as he was concerned, but an agitation sufficient to bring about the disaster. It was such an agitation that it brought about a disaster. What type of disaster, we will see later. So we will continue in the next turn. Thank you.